I'd like to call the meeting to order. Please rise for Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Township of Old Bridge Zoning Board of Adjustment, December 5, 2019. Adequate notice of this meeting of the Old Bridge Township Board of Adjustment has been provided in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act, at least 48 hours prior to the commencement of this meeting, by prominently posting in the municipal complex an announcement giving the time, the date, the location, and the agenda of this meeting, also by mailing such announcement to the Home News and Tribune, finally by filing a copy of such announcement with the municipal clerk. Ms. Silverman, can we have a roll call, please?
Yes, please excuse my voice. Mr. Dewhurst?
Here.
Ms. Chevalier? Here. Mr. Gomez?
Here.
Ms. Campbell?
Here.
Mr. Skolnick?
Here.
Mr. Walker?
Here.
Mr. Stoner?
Here.
Chairman Sullivan?
Here.
Mr. Sachs?
Here.
Ms. Swan? Mr. Hart? Mr. Darche?
Present.
Ms. Drunk? Here. Mr. Kang?
Mr. Kaliakalani's here.
All here. Ms. Silverman won the karaoke contest last night. She didn't want me to tell them, but that's the reason. As a matter of housekeeping, I'd ask everybody in the courtroom here this evening, kindly turn your phones off so we don't interrupt any of the testimony that takes place before the board. That would apply to the board members as well, if you haven't done so. We also are televised for those watching at home on Cable 15, the local Old Bridge cable channel. That channel has to go off at 10 p.m. Although we're starting right now, there is a possibility we might be here past 10. So if you're watching at home, it will be going off at 10 o'clock. I'll try and give you notice a few minutes ahead of time. But because of the rules, that cable has to go off at 10. Short of that, we're going to move forward on item number 2 on the agenda for this evening. We will be following the agenda as it is written. And its resolutions, we'll start with the first one, 35-18Z. Dennis Korkowski. Mr. Sachs.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dennis Korkowski, 3518Z, major site plan preliminary and final with D2, D3, and C variance approval. Property located block 1051, lot 6.11 at 2083 State Highway 35. Application was heard on October 3rd of 2019. Property located in the SD1 Special Development Zone. The applicant was seeking preliminary and final site plan approval to construct a 2,913 square foot addition to an existing garage building, renovate the existing building facade, restripe and reconfigure the parking lot, and reface the existing pylon sign along Route 35. Proposed site will be utilized as an automobile repair shop with 4 garage bays along with associated site improvements for parking, landscaping, lighting, and stormwater management. The proposed residential apartment on the second floor is to remain, as mixed-use buildings are not permitted in that zone. With the proposed expansion as an automobile repair garage and apartment on the second floor, a D2 use variance was required. Also, a D3 conditional use variance was required. There were 6 separate C variances for sign setback, parking within buffer along principal arterial, buffer along residential zone, and refuse storage and loading space. There were several witnesses who testified. Mr. Chester DiLorenzo provided engineering and planning testimony. Mr. Cesar Bustamante provided, a licensed architect, provided architectural testimony. There were several conditions of approval as follows. The residential apartment shall only be rented to a caretaker or watchman for the property. No storage of impounded vehicles will be permitted. Outdoor storage of vehicles will be limited to a maximum of 30 days per vehicle. The applicant will be required to obtain a temporary construction easement from the adjacent property owner to effectuate the rebuilding on the property, with the applicant being required to repair any portion of the adjacent property owner's parking area if damaged, and a copy of that temporary construction easement shall be provided to the board attorney for review and approval. The application was approved on October 3rd, and you are voting on the resolution this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Sachs. Board members, you've heard the resolution as written. Someone in favor of moving?
Motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved in second. Roll call, please.
Mr. Dewhurst?
Yes.
Ms. Chevalier?
Yes.
Mr. Dooner?
Yes.
Ms. Gelder?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Chairman Sullivan?
Yes. 12-19Z Wawa Inc., Mr. Sacks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Application 12-19Z, this is preliminary and final major site plan and C variances, property located Block 16002, lots 4 and 5 at 3600 US Highway 9. Application also heard on October 3rd, property located in the OG1 zone. The applicant was applying for major preliminary and final site plan with C variances to make improvements to the existing gas station. The applicant proposed to amend the previously approved site plan to replace the 6 existing gasoline dispensers, 3 existing 20,000-gallon underground storage tanks located on the property, on the eastern property line will remain. A 12,000 fuel gallon existing compartmentalized tank will be converted from premium to diesel fuel. The applicant also proposed to replace the existing price module affixed on the freestanding sign with a new price module to advertise the sale of diesel fuel. The fuel dispensers will have 2 Wawa signs on its face. There were 5 bulk variances for minimum lot area, minimum landscape area, Wawa sign on the fuel dispenser, maximum front yard setback along Route 9, and maximum front yard setback on Old Amboy Road. There was testimony from Mr. Ronald Kloss, professional engineer, Mr. David Shropshire, traffic engineer, and there were no additional conditions of approval on this application, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Sacks. Board members, someone want to move?
Motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Oh, you were not. I'll move it.
I rescind my motion.
And this, it was a second, correct?
Yes.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Lewis?
Yes.
Ms. Chevalier? Yes. Ms. McDermott?
Yes.
Ms. Gilman?
Yes.
Mr. Scarborough?
Yes.
Mr. Stoner?
Yes.
Chairman Sullivan?
Yes. 6-19Z 98N LLC, Mr. Sacks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Major site plan preliminary and final with D1C variances and design waiver approval, 98 Ann Street LLC. Property located Block 11232, Lot 7 at 314 State Highway 34. This was also heard on October 3rd. Subject property, the relief being sought, subject property is a corner property located at 314 Highway 34. It abuts Highway 34 and Amboy Road. Property comprised of a single tract of land containing .35 acres located within the EDO, Economic Development Opportunity Zone. Contains 2 existing buildings, a single-family residential dwelling, and a 1-story garage with 3 bays. Currently, there are only 2 driveways, access from Amboy Road and access from Route 34, and both provide access to the garage building. There is no access driveway to the residential home. The applicant was proposing to retain the existing residential building, construct an additional driveway to serve the house, renovate the commercial building to include approximately 400 square feet of office space and the remaining area as warehouse and storage space, construct 3 combined access driveways, a residential-only access on Amboy Road, a commercial access on Amboy Road, and a commercial access on Route 34, and propose site improvements including a new parking area with an ADA-compliant space, landscaping, and other associated site improvements. 6 bulk variances for minimum lot area, maximum front yard setback, minimum front yard setback along Route 34, minimum side yard setback, minimum combined side yard setback, number of parking spaces and loading space, and 2 design waivers for minimum parking stall length and minimum parking stall width. The D1 variance was required as the residential use is not permitted in that zone. There was testimony from Jacqueline Floor, who is the professional engineer for the project, Mr. Lee Klein, for the provided traffic testimony. Ms. Christine Cafone provided professional planning testimony. There were several conditions of approval. No outdoor storage of materials, trash, and recycling will be permitted on site. The commercial use of the property shall be restricted to an electrical or plumbing supply business. No tractor trailers shall be permitted on site, and no vehicles larger than 22 foot in length shall be permitted on site. Any change in use from an electrical or plumbing supply business shall require future approval from the board. The office use on site must be related and accessory to the storage of materials and supplies which will occur on site, and the applicant was to comply with all conditions of the Middlesex County Planning Board. A sidewalk shall be constructed on the Route 34 frontage, and additional landscaping shall be provided in the area to the rear driveway access on Amboy Road, subject to the review and approval of the professional staff. And you're voting on this resolution, which again was approved on October 3rd.
Thank you, Mr. Sacks. Board members, you've heard the resolution. Someone want to move it?
I'll move it to approve.
Who was the approval over here on my left? Me. And Mr. Connor, and second by Ms. Chevalier, please. Roll call.
Mr. Dewar?
Yes.
Ms. Chevalier? Yes. Mr. Connor?
Yes.
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 Chairman Sullivan?
Yes. 2819Z Fogley Industrial Properties LLC. Mr. Sachs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Application 2819Z, preliminary and final site plan, major site plan with D4 and C variance approval. Property located Block 1051, lots 27 and 28 at 20 Industrial Drive. This application was heard on November 7th. Property located in the SD1 Special Development Zone. The applicant was proposing to add 1,550 square feet of office space to the second floor of the existing structure. No change to the existing building footprint. A D4 floor area ratio is required as a proposed application exceeds the maximum floor area ratio of .25, which is permitted in the zone. There were 2 C variances for landscape area ratio and parking. Testimony from Mr. John Vicente, who provided planning and engineering testimony, and Mr. Anthony Foglia, principal of the applicant, also testified. There were a few conditions of approval as follows. The existing trailer parking area will be paved. The applicant agreed to provide a new site plan indicating existing conditions and proposed and improvements, subject to the review and approval of the professional staff. The applicant also agreed to provide a right-of-way dedication for submission to the township, and all other conditions of approval noted in any prior planning board and zoning board of adjustment approvals will continue in connection with the application. And again, this was voted on November 7th. You are dealing with the resolution this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Sachs. Board members, you've heard the resolution. Someone want to move it?
I'll move it.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Connor, I believe, was the second. Roll call, please.
Mr. Dewar?
Yes.
Ms. Chevalier?
Yes.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Ms. Kildall?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Chairman Sullivan?
Yes. The final one, final resolution is 20-19Z, Two Girls Waterworks Road, LLC. Mr. Sachs.
Major site plan preliminary and final with D1, D6, and C variances and design waiver approval. Property located block 6017.11, lot 9 at 601 Waterworks Road. Application was heard on November 7th. The applicant all right, so the applicant, subject property located at 601 Waterworks Road. Site is a corner lot located at the northwest quadrant of the intersection of unnamed road, which is actually, I think, it's Cheesequake Road, but it's called Unnamed Road, and Old Waterworks Road. The site is comprised of a single tract of land containing 5.55 acres, located in the SD3 Special Development Zone. Presently contains several structures, including a one-story office building, maintenance garage, masonry garage, storage shed, and a paved contractor's yard. The applicant is seeking as follows: to remove all existing structures, remove all block walls and barrier walls from the site, remove lamp, utility pole, and overhead wires located generally in the center of the property, remove the 6-foot-high chain-link fence that is presently around the site periphery and also within the property, construct a 9,800 square foot garage building with 7 bays and office space, construct a 1,056 square foot hopper building, construct a 2-story, 4,800 square foot concrete batch building, install an 8-foot-high chain-link fence around the perimeter of the property, and install stackable and movable concrete block barriers closer to the northerly property line for storage of raw materials. 3 separate C variances for front yard setback along Cheesequake Road, minimum landscape area ratio, and screening and fence along open storage areas. The D1 variance was required as a concrete batch plant is not a permitted use in the SD3 Special Development Zone. A D6 height variance is required to allow a structure on the subject property that exceeds the maximum height by 10 feet or 10%. The proposed garage building is going to be 55 feet high, and therefore a D6 variance required. Testimony again from Mr. John Vicente, who provided the engineering testimony in this application, and Mr. David Roberts, a professional planner, provided planning testimony. There were several conditions of approval as follows: no repairs to vehicles other than the applicant's vehicles will occur on site. The applicant shall not be required to submit any air pollution control permits until a C of O is issued, and the only office use shall be confined to the mezzanine area in the batch plant. Finally, the applicant agreed that all conditions of approval referenced in application 10-18Z will continue to apply to the subject site unless specifically modified herein. And again, this was voted on November 7th, and you're approving the resolution this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Sachs. Board members, you've heard the resolution. Someone want to move it?
Motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved in second. Roll call.
Yes.
Mr. Gunn?
Yes.
Ms. Kendall?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Chairman Sullivan?
Yes. Item number 3 on our agenda this evening is minutes, board members. We have 2. We'll take them individually. September 9, 2019. Hopefully, everyone has a chance to review them. Absent any comments or suggestions for additions or deletions, I'd ask someone move September 19th into the record.
I'll move it. Second.
Moved in second. Roll call, please.
Mr. Dewars?
Yes.
Mr. Gunn?
Yes.
Ms. Kendall?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Mr. Stoner?
Yes.
Chairman Sullivan?
Yes, sorry, board members, the same as to October 3rd, 2019, absent any commentary, additions, or deletions. I'd ask someone move it for memorialization.
Motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved in second. Roll call, please.
Mr. Dewars?
Yes.
Ms. Chevalier? Yes. Mr. Gunn?
Yes.
Ms. Kendall?
Yes.
Mr. Stoner? Yes. Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Chairman Sullivan?
Yes. All right, we'll move to the applications for the evening. We have 2. We'll take them in order, as I said earlier. The first one is 39-18Z. It's Oak Tree Plaza LLC at Old Bridge LLC. It's located 538 Route 34. This is for a one 3-story apartment building with 36 units, 2 retail buildings of 8890 square feet each. This is for residential major site plan final, non-residential major site plan final. The applicant is represented by Stephen Goen. Mr. Goen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for that introduction. Yes, for the record, Steve Goen, Gouin, from Giordano, Halloran, and Cecil, representing the applicant, Oak Tree Plaza at Old Bridge LLC. I'm here with our project professional engineer and planner, Sean Delaney, who I believe has been sworn and testified on this application, a number of other applications. When we get to him, though, we'll go through his credentials again. So as the chairman set forth in the opening, we were here on a couple of occasions receiving a number of D variances for this project, use density, FAR, and height, and then ultimately preliminary site plan approval. So we are here for final approval tonight. We have a review letter dated 12/2/19 from Environmental Resolutions, Inc. I'll say at the outset that we can comply with all of the recommendations of that review letter. There are a couple points that require testimony, and Sean will address those items. So I'll introduce Sean as my first witness.
Mr. Delaney, thank you. Swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Please state your name, spelling your last name, professional affiliation for the record.
Sure. Sean Delaney, Delany, with Bowman Consulting, a licensed professional engineer and planner in the state of New Jersey.
Mr. Delaney obviously had testified before this board on this and many other occasions, so we recognize him.
Thank you.
We accept his expertise.
So, Sean, why don't you take the board through a little bit of how we got to where we are now and what has changed, if anything, since the preliminary approval?
Okay. Just for the record, this is block 11252.14, lot 21.11, in the R30 zone, located along Route 34 and Sheila Court to the, I'll get my bearings correct again, to the east of the property. Residential uses to the south and to the west, also across Route 34 to the north of the site. As Mr. Goen pointed out, we're here for preliminary approval, which for 3 buildings on the site, a 36-unit, 3-story residential apartment, and 2 retail buildings, 1-story, totaling 17,780 square feet total for 8,890 square feet each. Those dimensions, those areas and number of units have not changed as part of this as part of the final application before you tonight. We did make some plan revisions. They were minor, addressing the comments and the conditions of the preliminary approval from the review letters from environmental resolutions, as well as from the Shade Tree Committee and the Fire Marshal. For those, most of the comments were minor in nature, didn't require substantial improvements to the plan, did not change setbacks, variances, coverages that were previously approved, heights, or any of the D or the C variances that were previously approved. Parking stayed the same, 70 spaces for the residential units, as well as 105 for the commercial, which was proposed previously as well. The access point has remained the same as well, 30-foot wide off of Route 34. Circulation patterns, all that has remained unchanged. One change that did occur was regard to lighting. We had two different lighting heights previously at 14 and 20 feet. The 20 feet exceeded the code. We agreed to knock it down to 18, and for consistency, we revised all the lights on the site to be 18 feet in height. So there's now two different items on that. We met with the Shade Tree Conservation Officer on site after the last hearing to go through some of the tree removal and recommendations in his letter, and revise the plans accordingly to address those as well in the packet before you. And the last one was the fire marshal comments. The one change that really it's different from the plan is the length of the fire lane at the rear of the building. Based upon the last review letter received from Mr. Garrity, he agreed. He suggested cutting back the fire lane to half the building width due to the fact that we are sprinkling the building, and he thought that was acceptable on his end. So that is shown on the plan as well. Instead of the full width of the entire rear of the building, it only goes halfway. So there's another. I can't see the dimension. Probably about maybe 100 feet of grass area that's now being added back into that was pavers that would have been able to drive on previously. A couple comments, I guess, from the last meeting that we carried over to this one that was split the preliminary and final through here. One was some concerns with some of the drainage design that we proposed that Mr. Dargy had comments in his previous letter. We have revised the plans in the report to address those comments, and I believe the plans, if there are any additional comments, we will work with him to satisfy those, but I believe addressed a majority, if not all of his comments regarding that. We had proposed signage last time that exceeded, that was requesting some variances that the board had took some exception to, that we removed those sign packages and rethought about it, resubmitted tonight. I think Mr. Dargy in the letter, fortunately, I think incorrectly noted that says that we got variances for the signs. We did not. We pulled the entire sign package last time, and are here before you, showing the signs for the first time tonight of what we would like to go on there in a revised aspect, and I'll go into that in a brief moment. And the last one is, I guess, talking about some phasing on the property and how that's going to work as well. So.
Actually, while we take a pause here, I'm going to ask Mr. Delaney to identify this exhibit that we've been looking at as Exhibit A1, which is a rendered version of the final site plan.
That's correct. That is it's a 2D color rendering of the landscape and layout and dimensioning plan. It's called Layout and Dimensioning and Phasing Plan, with the revision date of 10/15/19 prepared by my office. The only difference from the plans is the layout and dimensioning plan that was provided adds color and shows the landscaping on for what we expect it to look like.
You know, I think we probably need to mark this as A1.
A1.
A1, yes.
Yes. So regarding A1, it's hard to see on this one, unfortunately. We are regarding the signage. We are proposing two signs at the entrance from Route 34 into the site. One sign is permitted by the ordinance for the R30 zone, I believe. We are asking for two, so we need a variance for the second sign to be proposed. One sign will be strictly for the residential apartments at the rear of the site. That sign will be located, if you're facing the site, on the left-hand side or the eastern side of that entrance. We're proposing a sign of 40 square feet, so 4 feet high by 10 feet wide. It'll sit on top of a 2-foot high base, essentially. So the sign itself will be 40 square feet, 4 by 10 with a 2-foot base, 6-foot height total for the structure. Originally, we were proposing 2 retail signs up there, both of them 28 feet in height, 200 square feet. So this is a substantial reduction in what was previously proposed at this location. I believe that the height meets the complies with the ordinance requirements. I believe 6 feet is required for a residential sign from ground to the top of the face. The area we would need a variance. 20 square feet is permitted for a typical residential sign of this nature, where we're proposing 40. The commercial sign also has been revised. Like I said, we originally proposed 200 square feet. We reduced that down to 170 square feet. That's going to be a 10-foot wide by 17 feet high on top of a 1.5-foot base there. So the height of the sign is 18.5 feet, where 18 feet is permitted. So we're slightly over the maximum height, but we significantly reduced down from the 28 feet that was previously proposed. 16 tenant panels are proposed as was previous. Each panel is approximately 2 feet high by 5 feet wide, and the top 1 foot of the sign would incorporate the name of the center of Oak Tree Plaza. Obviously, the sign is set up so that each tenant of the 16 possible tenants in the buildings, 8 per building, could have a sign if a tenant takes up 2 spaces or a larger space and the total number is reduced. 2 of those panels could be combined in a way to reduce the number of names on there, but set aside for 16 possible tenants in the building. I know we talked about some building signs as well previously. We have no change from that as proposed at this time. What we testified to previously in the preliminary application, we agree we're proposing 1 sign per tenant, and that each one of the areas of those signs would comply with the ordinance requirement of 15% of the facade area for that storefront. If the signs will be submitted obviously if for zoning approvals at the time of each tenant, and if a tenant happened to exceed those signs, they'd have to come back here to the board and ask for a variance for that. But the intent is to keep it within 15% and comply with the current zoning. With regard to phasing, we're proposing 3 phases on the property, that's on the subject property right now for the development. Phase 1 would consist of the residential building at the rear. It would also include the parking associated at the rear of the site on all sides, the north, east, and west sides of it, the berm and the buffers to the rear, or the south side to the residential and west of the property, and to the north, adjacent to the home located to the west of the property that fronts on Route 34. It would include the main access drive from Route 34 up through between the 2 commercial buildings and into the area. Pavement and curb would be installed, brought around to the curb returns on each of those on each of those commercial buildings. It includes the fire lane on the the west side of Building B, all the way from the street, paved all the way through back to the residential portion. It would also include the stormwater basin, the Route 34 widening and improvements along there, as well as utilities necessary for this. In addition, the sidewalk that's located on the west side to the right of Building B would also be installed, as that is the connection from the residential area out to the sidewalk along the frontage of the property. Right now, we label on the plans phases 2A and 2B, 2A being Building A to the east or left side of the site of the driveway, and 2B to the right or west of the entrance drive. I'm going to switch that up a little bit and change them to phases 2 and 3. Phase 2 being Building B and Phase 3 being Building A, and it really would incorporate the building pad and the parking immediately adjacent and supporting those buildings. Any storm water that would be necessary from the residential to get to the basin that goes through those pads would be constructed at this time, and whatever other utilities, fire hydrants, stuff like that for emergency purposes would also be included as necessary in those pads. But those are the 3 phases that we are proposing and how they're being broken up for this development going forward. So with regards to the variances, putting on my planner's hat, as I mentioned, the variances we're asking tonight are related to the signage being proposed. We are proposing 2 signs where only one is permitted. These are freestanding signs. The area for the commercial retail site sign is 125 square feet permitted, where we're requesting 170. The residential sign, 40 square foot requested versus 20 square foot permitted. And the height of the sign for the commercial sign of 18 and a half, where 18 feet is permitted. And I believe the requested bulk variances are justified under the C2 criteria and can be granted without detriment. With regards to the first sign is for the commercial buildings, second for the residential, to identify the tenants and the residential access points for both patrons of each one of those, as well as for emergency services. The commercial sign provides the 16 tenant signs of a height 2 feet by 5 feet for each of those tenants, probably 2 lines of copy for a foot sign height that would be visible for motorists coming down the road, up or down the roadway along Route 34. Size appropriate for the visual identification based on the grades as well on the site. The residential sign, 40 square feet for the name of the apartment complex. Typical size sign for multifamily developments that I've been involved with. And the 18.5 foot height for the commercial, because of the number of tenants, once again, because of the grade relief on the road, provides good visibility for the motorists on the roadways to identify and make safe, efficient turns into the site without causing any problems on the road. I believe the following purposes of the municipal land use law will be advanced by the granting of these variances. Purpose A, promoting the public health, safety, morals, and welfare. Purpose C, providing adequate light, air, and open space. The reduction in the sizes of these signs from what we originally proposed obviously is an improvement, and I do not believe that the additional height and the area of the signs deviate substantially from what the ordinance requires. They are set back away from the property line, so they will not impact any site triangles as well, entering or leaving the property. And purpose I, to promote a desirable visual environment through creative development techniques and good civic design and arrangement. The signs will be constructed in a similar fashion, materials of the buildings on site to match the architecture, so it will complement the architecture and the design of the structures on the property. I believe there's no substantial detriment to the granting of the requested variances. The signage is appropriate for both the proposed retail portion and residential portion of the development to allow motorists to safely identify the site uses and make appropriate turning movements, and that the proposed variances will not substantially impair the intent and purpose of the master plan and zone ordinance. Once again, the area and the heights are appropriate given the topography of the adjacent roadway and the number of potential tenants within the retail buildings. Therefore, is my professional opinion that the benefits can be granted. The benefits of granting the variances will substantially outweigh any detriments.
Turning briefly, I'm going to just ask a couple of questions about the December 2nd environmental resolutions review letter. Comments 1 through 13 generally refer to the variance relief that Mr. Delaney just testified to and explains the variances that were previously granted for this application. Comment 14 asks about the status of the New Jersey Department of Transportation application. I'll ask Mr. Delaney to give us just a quick update on that, but essentially we're expecting it any day.
We have submitted the application. We received comments and resubmitted back to them back in September. Through our last conversations with them, we've heard that the departments that have responded have had no further comments on the plans. I believe they're waiting for one other department or section to offer their comments before a decision is rendered on the application. So we should, as Mr. Goen said, we're expecting it very shortly.
With respect to comment 15, Mr. Delaney testified about the phasing plan that is proposed. And for comment 16, which is that we request Title 39 authority to Old Bridge Township, we will do that. We will request that from the township. The rest of the comments in the review letter, 17 all the way through number 58, we agree with, and we will comply. They're either plan revisions that Mr. Delaney will have to coordinate with the board's engineer as part of resolution compliance, or they're items that Mr. Delaney's already testified to. So that is all I have for Mr. Delaney.
Mr. Goen, if you can just have Mr. Delaney address 24A, C, and also 26.
Sure.
Okay.
That's stormwater management.
Yeah. Sorry, Stu, 24A, what were the other ones? 26 and 24C?
Yeah, 24A and C and
Okay.
26.
Okay.
All those comments pertain to the seasonal high water, interpretation of seasonal high water table. Good.
Correct. So a prior application on this site had done some borings several years ago on the site, and which was the basis of our initial design for the project. Based on the boring that was located in the area of our detention basin, they went down 10 feet from the existing grade and didn't find any water table in that location. It was heavily clayed. The clay materials on site didn't have very much infiltration or permeability on the site for those materials. They did some other borings up on the upper side. They did find some water tables up there, but based upon the consistency of the soils that they found, many of those water tables, the instances they found, I believe, were perch conditions on top of clay materials that just the water wasn't being able to perk down, traveling sideways until it found a medium where it could then get through and get down into the underlying soils. We performed some additional test pits in the basin as required, did some percolation tests to verify those original findings. The classification of the soils that was came back during the analysis was consistent with what was shown in the prior analysis on the site. The permeability testing that was done indicated that there was little to no permeability on the soils on site, so the water was not infiltrating. They did not find any water table again in their excavations to the depths they went. So based on the information that we had on those two reports and the materials being the same, we set the water table at that 10-foot elevation at the bottom of that first boring from the historical one. They didn't find it down at a water table down to 10 feet. We said, okay, it may be another 5 feet down before they did find it, but we'll stop it at that 10 feet where they stopped the boring and go and use that as our limiting criteria. Because of that, our basin is designed also not to be an infiltration basin because there is no infiltration. The soils don't accommodate it. We're proposing a sand filter that drains down to an underdrain system to treat the water, and then an extended detention basin above that in accordance with the New Jersey Stormwater Best Management Practices Manual. This information was reviewed by the DEP as part of our wetlands permitting project, and they approved it as it was designed based upon the historical information, believe it or not, before the additional borings were done. Separation between the bottom of the sand filter and the seasonal high has to be 1 foot. For the pipe, we are proposing about 7.5 feet to that 10 foot. So even if the water table were a little higher, we still have plenty of separation to comply with the requirements.
You know, on that point, on the NJDEP review, I should point out that we did receive a wetlands LOI and also a GP6, which authorizes the fill of certain isolated wetlands on site, as well as a transition area waiver. So that, as Mr. Delaney said, that stormwater system was reviewed as part of that review.
I'm not sure you answered my question, though. Says the all right, let's go to 24A. First of all, test pit logs are dated after the NJDEP permit. Applicant should provide information relied upon by NJDEP to make determination of compliance. You gonna provide
I did
that?
mention that they relied on the original historical data before the new test pits were done to verify that information.
All right, I just want this on the record, okay? And to 24C, well, it says here, the test pit logs provided do not indicate seasonal high water table. The basis for asserting seasonal high water table separation from the bottom of the drainage layer should be provided.
That's what I just talked about based on there was no water, the water table was not found, the seasonal high was not found for those first 10 feet of the original borings. The material that we did on the second set of test pits corroborated the information of the materials that were there on the previous ones. So we set the seasonal high at that 10-foot mark where they didn't find anything.
Mr. Dargy, you're okay with that?
Yeah, the logic that Mr. Delaney's testifying to is sound logic. The only thing we asked for is really that then, information be provided to our office. I know the GP was provided, the plan and maybe the report that was submitted to DEP, you can submit that to us, so just so we have an idea what was submitted. Just for the board's edification, the stuff that we concern ourselves with when it comes to seasonal high water table and things like that with drainage basins are, are you impacting groundwater, which there's a heavy layer of clay throughout this whole site. I've actually witnessed the test pits from back when the previous application for the temple many years back. We went out there and actually poked a bunch of holes in the ground there to get an idea of what was going on and witnessed them. And it's pretty heavy soil. So whatever's getting put into the ground there isn't making its way into the aquifer because there's a heavy layer of soil. So that condition is not a concern. Then the other thing is whether the drainage basin that's being constructed is maintainable. Meaning, is the water table going to impact that? Well, the applicant's proposing an underdrained filter, sand filter, as opposed to an infiltration basin. So as long as that underdrain is functional and installed properly, the basin will drain out. Then it's a matter of constructability for the rest of the site improvements. And the concern that we had, which I talked to Mr. Delaney about earlier this evening, was the fact that you have the retaining wall there and whether there would be any kind of hydrostatic pressure behind that wall should some of that water that they found further up on the site find its way down here. And to resolve that, there's going to be a drain behind the retaining wall, which is a typical feature, a curtain drain, and that drain can get connected directly to the outlet structure in the drainage basin, so that any water that makes its way there has a relief point to get out. So I've said all those words just to say, I think we can find a solution, and we can work that out with Mr. Delaney.
And on top of that, the retaining wall will have full design structural calculations that will be submitted for review and approval. That accounts for all this information and the static pressures and as well before it will be constructed, so.
Rex, did you have anything else?
Yeah, just one other question. Just quickly, give me that phasing plan again.
Certainly. Phase 1 is the residential building, the parking, the buffers around the rear, the improvements along Route 34 in the right-of-way, the main access drive into the site, and the curbing on both sides of that access road, the sidewalk to the west connecting the residential to Route 34, and then the fire lane on the west side to the right of Building B from Route 34 back to the residential space, the detention basin as well. And then whatever other stormwater improvements and utilities are necessary to service the residential building. Then Phase 2 would be Building B, and it would consist of really the building pad and the parking areas and curbing associated with it, and landscaping and lighting. Unless lighting is necessary for the sidewalk, we'll include that portion as well for security purposes in Phase 1. And then Phase 3 would be Building A and its improvements, parking, paving, landscaping, and utility servicing it.
And you're going to revise the plans to clearly delineate all that, right?
Correct. If the plans do show those delineations, we'll make it more evident and work with Ms. Jarge to make sure that it's clear and evident for everyone.
I'll just point out that that phasing is shown on sheet 4 of 27 of the submitted site plan.
All right, as to any other testimony, Mr. Dargy.
Mr. Chairman, as Mr. Delaney said, our letters dated December 2nd, 2019. We did cover just about the items that we needed to discuss. We do have a couple of comments, or quite a few comments that are mostly detailed kind of comments that the applicant has agreed to work out with our office. The questions regarding the seasonal high water table were really our biggest concern, and the phasing were our biggest concerns, and Mr. Delaney's taken quite a bit of time to explain that, so I have no other questions for him.
Calico. Mr. K.
You've done better with that.
Kalani.
Hold on. Little Kalani.
You're regressing.
Damn, I'm going back.
They have addressed most of our comments from our previous letter. There's some minor things. One of the main things is buffering to this adjacent lot 21.12, that buffer in there. I think that needs to be updated. Some modifications to the lighting in the parking lot where it matches into the retail area. And basically everything else, I mean, they've agreed to do everything, so I think we're...
Nothing to restrict the board from acting. Nothing that's holding you back right now.
No.
Mr. Drum, you have anything on this?
I do not.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, one other thing regarding the sign variance. The sign that that's detailed on the application, is that the exact sign you guys are going to be looking to build? It's kind of plain.
The dimensions of it, the brick base is so, It may get dressed up a little bit
Okay.
around the perimeter. It's graphical representation really of the sizes and the height that we're proposing.
I agreed, but I mean, in the past, when the board has entertained variances for signage, we kind of like to at least see what the signs are going to look like, and if nothing, absent that, at least to try to pin the applicant down with regard to what the signs are going to look like. So that's the only thing I would have to offer to the board here.
Because I thought I was missing something, and I was going through the papers looking for the pictures of this, and while you gave a detailed description of what they are, it was rather quick, and I would certainly like to see something. I don't know if my fellow members on the board would, but
There's a
I'd have
general.
to at least go through it again, because it was rather confusing, and I'm still curious why you can't get to 18 from 18 and a half.
Right, that's,
It's on the detail sheet.
But anything else that you,
I think.
I would like to talk about
Yeah,
that.
I think the signage is something the board may want to talk about, like that half foot, I think it can be accomplished by
think so.
reducing the panel height on each one of the tenant heights by 2 inches, and they'll give you your half foot.
I would think so.
And also reduce the area variance a little bit, too.
It's always that last 6 inches there that ruined the whole plan. Let me go to my left, as far as the testimony was engineering testimony and planning testimony. Any questions on my left? Do you agree on my left, that you'd like to hear more about the signage?
Yes. Yes.
Any questions on my right for now?
No questions, but I'd definitely like to see a diagram, and I'd like it to meet the variance size at 18 feet.
They say what a picture's worth 1,000 words, and we're used to seeing that. And again, you probably saw me paging through, I couldn't find anything. So it does kind of bother us. So absent any questions, do you want to further explain, Mr. Goen, how do you want to handle it?
Sure. Why don't we just point out that for the board's review, it's on page 20 of 27 of the site plan package.
In the
and
lower left-hand corner.
Ms. Silverman could pull that up. That's an older version. Site plan package dated.
It's revised. 10/15/19 is the,
10/15/19.
You say 2027, right?
correct, in the lower left-hand corner.
Board members, have you come up with that? It's on the very bottom left. Chevalier, you see that?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Yeah, even this one's very plain.
So, Mr. Delaney, the top picture on 2027, on the bottom left, that would indicate the vertical sign there, the dimensions are,
18 and a half from the ground to the
Right.
top of the sign, with a 1 foot 6 inch base, brick faced with a mantle above it, and then the sign above it would be 16 feet high for the tenants, and then a 1 foot area for the ID of the center. And the sign would be 10 feet wide, with the mantle extending a little bit beyond there, beyond the edge of it, with the tenant sizes, each sign about 2 feet by 5 feet.
this would sit on Route 34, correct?
Correct. It would sit on,
The
the
dual-face sign?
dual-face sign in the island, in the little islands just on on either side of the entrance drive, set back from the site, from the property line, I believe 10 feet
Which side of it?
on both sides. The commercial sign is you're facing the site on the right-hand side, close in front of Building B on that location, and the residential sign is on the left-hand side in front of Building A.
So from street level to the top of the sign is, from ground level, I should say.
From ground level to top of the sign is 18 and a half. We can reduce that to 18 feet.
The bottom one is located after we enter the property, right?
No, that was also located at the main entrance. That is located the island just to the left of the entrance as you're coming in front of Building A.
We probably have a little better font than what's there.
Correct, yeah. It'll be a dressed up font of the,
Tenant logos. you know,
yeah,
that
a
kind of-
logo with the name of the apartment complex
So
and street address,
I think what
obviously.
we said is we're going to bring it down to 18 feet so it's compliant height.
Yeah.
So you eliminate that variance.
Correct.
Okay. Is that a-
Well, yeah, I mean, that's appreciated, bring it down to, so we just had that one less variance. You probably are looking for some conditions, if the board, again, is willing to entertain the area variances, to at least conditions such as, materials and, finishes to match
Mhm.
the architecture, which I'm sure that applicant will be doing. But we also want maybe, because again, it's a variance, if you're kind of moving blindly as far as look at the sign, I would probably recommend that we have a condition that the sign is submitted to Ms. Swan for review.
Yep.
And
That's fine.
Yeah, we,
Board members, would you understand that, right? So this, it would be reviewed by Ms. Sawant before any approval.
yeah,
We agree?
we could put a condition in that it's subject to the review and approval of the professional staff.
Yep, we agree.
So let me just go to my board members and see, as to what was explained, obviously, there's going to be, the sign, probably the fonts would be more in line with what's going to be on the buildings.
Correct.
Does anybody have any questions about either of the two? They're going to, the bigger one is going to come down to 18, it'll eliminate the variance necessary on that. And the bottom one, obviously, is going to be a different style of writing. You have any problem with that? Okay, how about on my right?
No, I'm good with that.
None? Okay, Mr. Sachs?
What's the size of the letter?
The lettering at most is a 2-foot panel for the sign, so the letters would probably be less than a foot height for 2 rows of copy. You give a little space between them, so you're probably looking at 10-inch letters realistically with a gap between the two.
it's internally illuminated.
Yes. That's what we're proposing.
The new area winds up being 165 square feet if we get
Yep.
that.
Anything else from board members to the witness? No? Mr. Sachs, you and I were discussing phase-out. I have a storied history on here, being here a little long in the tooth, I guess, and hearing too many of these, and seeing a lot of these build-outs where the residential goes up, the commercial end starts, and it lays there dormant. It's not a good look in the township. We've had it a few times in a few locations, and we certainly don't want to see that happen. I don't know if you have any
Well,
advice to the board, Mr. Sachs,
well,
but
yeah, what we've done in the past, I know with some of these mixed-use residential and commercial projects, retail projects, is, after a certain portion of the residential building is constructed or C of O's issued, I'm assuming these will be rental apartments, there's got to be some indication from the applicant that they're going to start the construction on the commercial end. All right?
Yeah, actually, so we had thought about that. What we were going to propose, actually, is that the first phase of the commercial, which is Building B,
Right.
the building on the right of the rendered site plan, as you see, the first phase of the commercial would be completed by the time, there would be no COs to the residential by the time the first phase is completed. So we would do the first phase of commercial at the same time we're doing the residential. Second phase of commercial would likely follow a bit behind that.
All right.
So what we were going to commit to is that after the last CO is issued for the first phase of the commercial, we would start the second phase no later than 12 months from the last CO.
All right.
board members? Any comments? Okay with that? All right.
So, and Building B and the residential will be completed at the same time, is what you're saying?
Essentially, and the, right, so Building B would have to be complete before there's any COs for the
Fine,
residential.
okay.
Professionals?
I-
Okay.
So you must have been reading my mind. Okay, good.
Figured you'd ask.
You guys are all the same. All right, thank you for that. You have any other further testimony?
I do not.
Okay, I'd like to go to the public then, in that case. This is matter 3918Z Oak Tree Plaza at Old Bridge LLC. It's located on 538 Route 34, just before Sheila Drive. Anybody want to comment on this project or have any comments or questions? Please raise your hand and come forward. All right, no one has, I'll close the public portion. Any final comments, Mr. Go?
No, I think the board has heard enough.
This, Mr. Sachs, we'd have to vote on the, we eliminated one signage, but there's still
There's two C variant, yeah, there's a C variance for the sign areas.
the area and the height, right?
There's
No more
there's
height.
three. The
Right.
two signs versus
Right.
one, and then the areas for each of the
Right,
signs.
right.
So their Cs can be taken together, correct?
We could take the Cs together.
It's
Yep.
all in reference to the signs. So it'll be Cs altogether for three, right? of them? Three of
Yes,
them?
three.
Okay. Someone want to move the Cs?
Motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
You beat you out down there, Mr. Stoner. You get the next one.
Who was seconded that?
Second was Ms. Kilduff.
Gotcha, okay.
Roll call.
Mr. Dewey?
Yes.
Ms. Chevrolet? Yes. Mr. Connor?
Yes.
Ms. Gildo?
Yes.
Yes.
Chairman Sullivan?
Yes.
And now final.
Residential major site plan final, right?
Yep, yep. We could take the residential, and we could do it all together.
Do both?
Yeah, that's
All right,
fine.
It'll be residential
And
and
commercial.
non-residential major site plan final. Someone want to move it?
I'll move it.
Mr. Connor?
Yes.
All right, I'll second. Roll call, please.
Mr. Durick?
Yes.
Ms. Chevalier?
Yes.
Mr. Cronin?
Yes.
Ms. Keller?
Yes.
Yes.
Chairman Sullivan?
Yes. Mr.
Thank
Gall,
you.
thank you and your witness, Mr. Delaney, for
Thank you.
your
Thank you very much.
appearance this evening. Happy holidays, gentlemen.
Thank you, you too.
We hope this project comes out looking great.
So late.
there any
Especially
change?
after I agreed to that phasing condition, I better work.
Are you staying on, the stenographer's staying on, correct, Sim? Okay, yes? You on for the next one, too? Yeah. Do you need a break? I'll give you 5 minutes if you'd like.
Yeah.
All right, for those watching at home, we're going to take a quick 5-minute break for the stenographer, and so the next application can get set up. Call the meeting back to order. Ms. Silverman, could we have a roll call, please?
Here.
Ms. Chevalier?
Here.
Mr. Cronin?
Here.
Ms. Keller?
Here.
Here.
Mr. Stone?
Here.
Chairman Sullivan?
Here.
Mr. Sacks?
Here.
Mr. Long? Here. Mr. Hart? Here. Mr. Dorsey?
Present.
Ms. Cronin?
Here.
Everyone's good. We have the final application for this evening. It's 15-19Z, Metro Storage LLC, Route 9 and Cindy Street. This is for a 3-story self-storage facility. It's in the OG1 zone, is seeking preliminary and final major site plan with C&D variances. John Wicascala representing the applicant. Sir?
Good evening, Chairman, board members. It's our pleasure to be back before you this evening. This is our third public hearing with respect to this application for Metro Storage. We were first here on October 3rd. You heard the testimony that evening of our civil engineer, Brad Bowler, who provided detailed overview of the existing conditions and overall site plan as proposed. You also heard from Bob Heilman, project architect, and he provided both architectural and operations testimony with respect to this proposed self-storage facility. Board may recall between our first hearing and our second hearing, we actually made revised site plan submittals responsive to all the review comments we had from the board engineer, planner, your fire marshal, et cetera. I believe our revised plans pretty much addressed all of their comments, a few remaining items, which I stipulated when we were here last month, we would comply with all other outstanding remaining items that are identified in those reports. As a further reminder, we also stipulated that this proposed project, and the board has seen it, we do have a slide up on the screen. It's really limited. This is a 10-acre site. The development portion of the site is really limited to a 2.5, 3-acre portion of it. And the remainder, what we had stipulated to is the remainder of the property, and you can't see the entirety of it on this shot that's up there now, we would be agreeable, if approved, to permanently preserving that as open space or deed restricting it or what have you, otherwise prohibiting, any other development for the remaining 6.5 to 7 acres of the site. We were last year on November 7th, that evening, you did hear the testimony from our traffic engineer, John Harder. He spoke to traffic impacts, he spoke to parking. Mr. Harder concluded relative to, from a traffic perspective, this is a very low traffic generating land use that is at a busy location along Route 9. And really just to summarize Mr. Harder's testimony, from a trip generation perspective, in the morning peak hour, it was a total of 13 trips to this facility. In the afternoon peak hour, a total of 23 trips over that 1 hour period. And on a Saturday peak hour, approximately 41 trips. We're back this evening. We've got our professional planner, Nicholas Graviano. Before I call him, I do want to advise the board, since we were here last, we did receive the final signed NJDOT access permit that was submitted to Ms. Silverman on November 13th, 2019. I assume it's part of the record. I would also advise you that we did make our revised submittal to the DEP relative to wetlands permitting. That documentation is now with the DEP. As before, we do understand that, any approvals that may be granted with respect to this project are subject to all outside agencies, not the least of which is the DEP in this regard. So that documentation is back in, and that will go through the process that it goes through. So at this time, I'd like to call Nick Graviano.
Mr. Graviano, please raise your right hand. You swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
All right, please state your name, spelling your last name, professional affiliation for the record.
Yes, Nicholas with an H, Graviano, G-R-A-V as in Victor, I-A-N-O. I'm a planner and partner with Graviano and Gillis Architects and Planners.
Mr. Chairman, I think Mr. Graviano has testified
Yeah, I
before
was
this
going to
board
tell
on other
the board,
occasions.
I'm sure Mr. Graviano is familiar to most of you, if not all. He has testified before. We accept his expertise.
Thank you. So the applicant is before you this evening for preliminary and final site plan approval with associated D and C variances. The property is a specific piece of property known as Block 13264.11, Lot 61.11. It's located at Route 9 and Cindy Street. The applicant proposes a 3-story self-storage building with approximately 126,300 square feet and a 1-story building totaling 6,600 square feet. The site is located on State Highway 9, mixed-use commercial corridor. There's a single-family detached development to the east. There's a funeral home to the south, the Ticetown Square Shopping Center to the north of the parcel, and to the west is the Route 9 right-of-way. With respect to the D variances that the applicant is requesting this evening, the applicant is requesting a D1 use variance, and that storage facilities are not a permitted use in the OG1 district. Additionally, the applicant is requesting a D4 FAR variance, where a maximum FAR of .25 is permitted and an FAR of .312 is proposed. Additionally, the applicant is requesting a D6 height variance, where a maximum building height of 30 feet is required and a height of 34.1 feet is proposed. The applicant is also requesting C variances related to the freestanding sign, where 50 square foot is permitted and 58.9 square feet is proposed. The applicant is also requesting an LED sign approximately 2 feet 7 inches by 8 feet integrated into the freestanding sign. The applicant is requesting a variance for off-street parking spaces. 27 are required and 13 are proposed. The applicant is requesting a variance for loading spaces, where 6 are required and 2 are proposed. Additionally, parking variance for parking within the buffer along Route 9 is requested. And then lastly, there are 2 variances requested related to the buffer adjacent to residential properties. 27.9 feet is proposed, where 50 feet is required. With respect to waivers, the applicant is requesting waivers for lighting fixture spacing, lighting foot candles, and loading space size being less than what's required. So when you analyze the permitted uses that are in this zone, you have a wide array of more intensive land uses than what the applicant is proposing before you this evening, which could be developed on the site. Specifically, you could develop the site with hotels and motels, drinking places, banks and financial institutions, real estate and insurance offices, hospitals and medical services, doctors' offices, law offices, other professional services, as well as art studios, schools, playgrounds, community centers, and animal hospitals. So it is a zone that permits a wide array of more intensive uses than what the applicant is proposing this evening. When the board must look at the D1 variance, the board has the power to grant such D1 variances in particular cases and for special reasons. That's what's called the positive criteria of the D1 variance. And when you analyze the positive criteria, the promotion of the general welfare is the zoning purpose, which clearly amplifies the meaning of the term special reasons. Now, the benefit to the community, the benefit to Old Bridge from a non-inherently beneficial use is not from the use itself, but development on a site in the community that is particularly suited for the very enterprise that is proposed. Now, the applicant does not need to demonstrate that there are other viable locations in the township for this type of use, just that this site has characteristics that make it suitable for such use. And then lastly, the negative criteria, no variance relief can be granted without showing that the variance or other relief can be granted without substantial detriment to the public good and will not substantially impair the intent and purpose of the zone plan and zoning ordinance. Now, when we dive deeper into the term of particular suitability, here you have a highway location with proximity to adjacent single-family neighborhoods as well as commercial uses. These are both demographics that could use the services that are going to be offered on site. And when I analyze the intent and purpose of the OR1 district, you'll see that the applicant's use is conforming with the goals and objectives of that zoning district. Additionally, you heard John Harder in previous testimony in a previous hearing talk about the low-intensity visitor and traffic generation that is generated from this project, which is key considering that the site is located near the jug handle entrance. So I think the promotion of land uses which minimize vehicle turning movements at that section is a great planning initiative. And the applicant has received the NJDOT access permit. So obviously the DOT has signed off on the design and configuration at this intersection. Additionally, this site is located next to a residential neighborhood. This is a very low activity use, which helps reduce potential nuisance factors to the residential community, which is abutting. You know, you could have uses such as bars and restaurants that are open later hours than what's proposed before you this evening. You could also have other uses that create more of a nuisance than you'll get with this storage facility. Then the last topic I'd like to touch on with respect to the particular suitability is the topography of the site, which slopes from the residential, abutting residential lot line to Route 9. So here you have a site where, actually it slopes the other way, where the building can be incorporated into the topography where it appears to be lower on the side adjacent to the residential land uses than it looks on the Route 9 street frontage. And the planner's review letter made a very good comment on that, where the appearance of the building at the residential side of the property appears to be 25 feet. So it's not the 34 feet that you see on the Route 9 frontage of the building. And this ordinance measures height from that frontage on the Route 9 portion of the site. So really you have a building that is 25 foot in the back and 34 feet in the front. And that topography of the site helps minimize any potential effects of the height of this building to the adjacent residential neighborhood. Moving on to the purposes of zoning and the advancement of purposes of zoning in the municipal land use law, this proposal helps encourage municipal action to guide the appropriate use of lands in the state in a manner which will help promote the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare. I touched on some of that with the analysis of the particular suitability. This is promoting a low-intensity land use adjacent to the Cindy Lane jug handle on Route 9. Additionally, it's promoting a use which will help promote the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare by not creating nuisances to the adjoining residential community. Additionally, it helps promote the establishment of appropriate population densities that will contribute to the well-being of persons, community, regions, and preservation of the environment. And the applicant has agreed to permanently preserve the open space that's to the north of the development area, which helps lead to the preservation of the environment. Additionally, it helps advance Purpose G to provide sufficient space and appropriate location for a variety of commercial uses to meet the needs of New Jersey citizens. This is a use which can be used by both the residential and the commercial community. And the applicant, through engineering testimony, has demonstrated that there is sufficient space in this location to accommodate the proposed use. Then lastly, this helps promote a desirable visual environment through creative development techniques and good civic design and arrangement. That's Purpose I. There's a very extensive landscaping package which is proposed as part of this project. You'll see it on the screen before you this evening. So I think that helps highlight the good civic design and arrangement that has been considered with this project. I looked at the 2019 master plan report, specifically on page 18, with respect to the site being located in the OG1 zone. It went on to state, with changing market trends and development needs, the structure of the general office zone shall be evaluated for alternate non-residential uses. The OG zones were once areas where small, moderate, and large office complexes were to be developed due to the ease of access to highways and commuter access points. However, few of these zones were developed with such uses. And the master plan went on to state that alternative land uses in these areas should be examined. And this, frankly, is a great land use to help combat the changing office and retail economy that many of our state's commercial areas are facing right now. You can't buy storage space online. You can't work, storage space isn't affected by working from your laptop at your kitchen table and other shared offices and other co-working spaces. So this is a commercial use which is adaptive and resilient to the changing economic times of the state and of the community. The purpose of the OG zone is, the purpose of the zone is to provide development opportunities for establishment primarily engaged in rendering a wide variety of services to individuals and business establishments to serve the residents of the entire township as well as the regional population. And this is certainly a use that helps accomplish that objective. So when you look at a master plan that recognizes that this zone plan is flawed and you have to start examining other land uses in these areas and in this zone, and a use that coincides with the purposes of the OG zone, there's no substantial impairment of the zone plan or zoning ordinance with the potential granting of this D1 use variance. Moving to the D4, the FAR variance, a maximum FAR of 0.25 is permitted, and an FAR of 0.312 is proposed. To put this in perspective, this equates to approximately 8,800 square feet of the building footprint of the three-story building on a 10-acre site, well, 9.782 acre site. That's pretty minimal in nature. The applicant is only 6.2% over the FAR requirement. And I would just like to note that that FAR requirement was developed to help rein in some of the more intensive land uses which are permitted on this site, such as professional offices, medical offices, hospitals. Here in a low-intensity land use, that FAR control really isn't as important because it's not generating the trips and it's not generating the user activity that's located on site. When you analyze the proofs required to grant a D4 variance, a D4 FAR variance is more akin to the D3 conditional use variance, in that with respect to this particular variance, the applicant does not need to demonstrate a particular suitability, but just that the site can accommodate the proposed use with a larger floor area than what's permitted by ordinance. And you've heard extensive testimony by Mr. Bowler with respect of the site's ability to accommodate the proposed use from a vehicular circulation-wise, from a parking standpoint, from a loading standpoint, and as well as a drainage standpoint. So this is clearly a site that can accommodate the FAR that's in excess of the ordinance requirement. And given the fact that this is a self-storage building and not a professional office, not a medical office, not a hospital or medical center, there's no substantial impairment to the zone plan or zoning ordinance with the granting of that variance. With the D6 variance, since this, and the D6 variance is the height variance, since this use itself is not permitted in the zone, the same proofs as the D1 variance apply with respect to the height variance that's required. And as I stated before, the topography of the site, as well as, you know, the topographical conditions, and the fact that the building is only the additional height on the Route 9 corridor, I do not see that as being a substantial impairment to the zone plan. Roughly, it's 1 foot over, you know, what would otherwise be permitted under a C variance scenario. It's not a drastic request for an increase in height. You know, frankly, the single-family development behind that allows 35 feet in height. This is roughly 34. I don't think it's a substantial departure. I think given the fact that it's 25 feet on the side where the property abuts the neighboring residential dwellings, there's no substantial detriment to the community, and there's no substantial detriment to the zone plan or zoning ordinance with the D6 height variance. Moving on to the C variances, the applicant's requesting a freestanding sign, which is 8.9 square feet larger than what's proposed. I feel that this is a pretty minimal deviation from the ordinance requirements. With respect to the LED signs, the LED sign is integrated into the freestanding sign itself. I think any potential negative impacts of the LED sign can be mitigated by controls on the frequency of the changing message, and that could be worked out with the board professionals. The applicant is requesting the parking variance. You've seen in the board planner's review letter that, you know, other existing self-storage facilities in the community do have a reduction in spaces from ordinance standards. And frankly, you heard through the testimony of Mr. Harder that the parking that's provided on this site is enough to meet the needs of this proposed development. And that same case also applies with the loading spaces, the 2 loading spaces that are proposed where 6 is required. The applicant is very in tune what's required for the business, is going to provide what's needed to make the business operate and function properly, and 2 loading spaces are only needed for a business of this type. The variance request for the parking along the 75-foot buffer along Route 9, that's mitigated by an extensive landscaping package and by the fact that the majority of the site is open space. The applicant provided parking accommodations where it was feasible, and the extensive landscaping package can help mitigate that reduced buffer within that 75 feet along Route 9. Moving on to the buffer adjacent to the single-family dwellings to the east, the applicant is requesting 27.9 feet where 50 feet is required. And in this case, you'll see on the aerial that the applicant has provided a very, very dense landscaping package along with fencing. And then the building that's proposed at that location also serves as another buffer to the parking and drive circulation area. So while the applicant is requesting a reduction in that area, I think the plantings and the 1-story building, which will be shielded by the fence and the landscaping, does not create a substantial impairment to the zone plan in that area. All of those variances, all the C variances, can be granted under the C2 criteria. Under the C2 criteria, hardship does not need to be demonstrated, just that it advances purposes of zoning listed in the municipal land use law. all the purposes of zoning that were given with respect to the analysis of the D variances. A, E, G, and I also apply for the granting of the C2 variances, and they can be granted without substantial impairment to the zone plan or zoning ordinance.
Thank you. Nothing further, Chairman.
What?
Thank you. With the signage, the proposed sign, can you explain the LED animated sign? What would be displayed? What would be the message? Why do you need it?
I'm going to defer to Mr. Heilman on that question, so he can answer the question of the LED operation, what would be supplied, and you should come back up. And I'll remind him that he is also still under oath. He was previously sworn.
He was
Or
sworn.
we could defer, Chairman, if you like, but
No, that's okay.
He was.
You can answer it, and he is under oath.
He is under oath still.
Prior testimony.
So the LED sign, similar to many that you have seen, similar to maybe a Walgreens, it's really just to communicate with our customers. It gives them knowledge about if we have maybe a move-in special. It's we typically, our standard is a watch fire 4-color, so it's a nice unit. It's not a bright yellow or something like that. It's a full 4-color video. I'd have to look at what the resolution of them are, but it's not a flashing, it's not an attention-getting device. It's to share information with customers.
The reason I ask is, one, you're asking for a sign area variance. Second, personally, I'm not a huge fan of the LED signs. Our signage ordinance is kind of weak, and I'm working on the signage ordinance, but I mean, if you don't need it, then don't ask for it, because this building is quite close to the highway. You have a monument sign there. You have, I believe, one wall sign. There's some confusion. There were 2 proposed originally. I had questioned. I didn't see the revised plans, but I believe that one has been eliminated.
we eliminated one. We still have, we have one left, yes.
Right. So, since you're asking for the sign area variance, if you eliminate the LED, you will be well within the permitted sign for that zone, and you would not require 2 variances in that instance. And, I mean, I have seen in the past some users, like a daycare comes in, puts in a message, but sometimes the message just says, "Have a good day." Do you really need that? Does it really help your business? So unless it is quite essential to the business, I would not be recommending having an LED sign. But if you make a strong case that you will have specials and you need it,
Well, we do have
Then
data
it's
that
upon
shows
the
that it
board.
does help our business. So from that aspect, it is something I'm asking for because we do have data that suggests it does help. So I would like to continue, but, I mean, if it's becomes, yeah, I don't know how I want to express that, but it's something that we are asking for. I would like to keep it in the project at this point in time. I understand that if we removed it, we'd have no variance because we'd be below the square limit of the sign ask, but it does help our business. It does help us out. And
because to me, for somebody who's passing by or who's traversing through Route 9, I don't know how much of a time that person gets to read the message because you're moving at a fast pace.
when
So-
the light's green.
True, but it also means that it is kind of a distraction. It's my opinion, though. But, I mean, when you're moving at a high speed, how much do you really wait to read a message? We know Metro Storage is in there. There is a sign that shows it's your entrance. Do we really need an LED?
We're going to eliminate 2 variances from the list, Chairman.
All right, so you're going to eliminate, the LED
The
signage?
LED sign will be eliminated, and obviously the sign plan would be revised, and
Fine.
I don't know where that puts us square footage-wise, but I know it's well under the.
I think it will be within 50 square feet, I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you.
The next question, parking. I believe Ms. Drum had requested that you had 13 spaces, but she will be more comfortable if you add 1 or 2 spaces, I believe 2. And there is enough room for you to add those 2 spaces, even if that means those are bank spaces, correct?
Yes. Yeah, we can. We actually do have room on that. I'm sorry, and I thought we had touched on it last month, but I guess we did not. I think what our preference would be, we are very confident that 13 is more than enough, so our preference would be to bank, 2 additional spaces, and,
Will that be acceptable?
we can figure a way and avoid more coverage that might be unnecessary, but we can make it work.
Thank you. The wall sign, so there will be just one wall sign, correct? And that will be on the westerly side of the building, is that correct?
Facing Route 9.
Route 9 side.
Route 9 side.
Yes, that is correct.
So you do not need a variance for, an additional variance for the number of proposed wall signs, correct?
That is correct.
Right. I know I had spoken to the engineer, but since there is a waiver involved, there's a landscape waiver for having less than 5 feet along the southerly property line. Could you just explain to the board why that waiver is required, either the planner or the engineer?
That waiver is required due to a drive aisle that's next to the existing funeral home. It is adjacent to a commercial use. The applicant has provided plantings in that buffer. While a waiver is required, I think since it is next to a commercial use, there's no substantial impairment to the ordinance on that.
Okay. Thank you. The only last comment I have, and it's not a question, it's just a general comment. At the beginning of this year, I had gone and reevaluated our master plan reexamination report. There were many commercial zones I was trying to look at and see if the current LDO is over stringent when it comes to permitted uses. At that same time, I had also taken a look at the OG zone. In the past, we have seen, the planning department has seen that some of the sites that got an approval for office use a decade ago never got built. And now some of them are coming back to us, asking if they can do something different with the site, or they want to propose a commercial use. We also have noticed, like the zoning officer and me, we were looking at the entire OG zones, and we found that in the past, in the last 2 decades probably, because of the proximity to Route 9 or Route 18, many of these sites in the OG zone have been approved with commercial uses. So the intention behind adding the new recommendation in the master plan re-exam was to go and evaluate OG zones to see if they, if we can allow commercial uses along with office uses, because I think office use has been a problem throughout the country with internet shopping, internet retailing. There is lesser need for office space, and many of the townships, many of the municipalities are considering redevelopment, rezoning. So that is something I will be looking at in the future, and I just wanted the board to be aware of.
When you brought up the buffer on the south side of the building, I know the funeral home there has changed, and they now have a rear entrance. They always use the front. Will the buffering cover that area where people, if you look at it looks like on here that you've designed it as such. the rear of that building, they now use as an entrance. So we would want, if, upon approval, if this were approved, you'd want that to be covered, so those people going into that other business wouldn't.
The buffer does cover that, Chairman. I confirmed with my engineer.
Okay.
and It is shown, all more difficult at
Very-
this scale.
Okay.
That's
Ms.
all on
Wan-
my, that's all on my
Dodgy?
end.
I have nothing for the applicant's planner.
Okay, Ms. Drum, you weighed in on the parking. Do you, we want to add anything? That-
Not regards to the planning testimony, no.
Okay. And that's probably, is that your only one? witness
Only
tonight?
one,
That's what I
last
thought.
witness, yep.
You have questions then? And
I do.
we have you have your other
Yep,
professionals here, correct?
yep.
So a few things. I read the transcript of last month's meeting, and there was not acknowledgement from the applicant or the applicant's professionals that they've seen our latest review letter. Dated was October 31st. So I want to make sure that, one, the applicant's team has received that.
Well, I know we did.
In there, I guess I have, I have two concerns, primary concerns besides the parking. And also I want to make a comment, at least for the board, is one of our suggestions, again, it's somewhat outside our purview, is that the Route 9 sidewalk is somewhat overgrown. And the applicant made a comment that they would field evaluate to see whether it's got to be upgraded. I do recommend that should be a condition of approval. That sidewalk is in pretty poor condition, and again, it is overgrown.
That will do. Yes, agreed.
Yeah, and the applicant's engineer made a comment that they would do that. In between the October meeting and the November meeting, there were some revised plans. And one of the revised plans did show some templates, turning templates. And the one concern is the loading bays. So the loading bays, I'm going to presume are going to be used by, people like you and I that are bringing in either our own trucks or even maybe a U-Haul or something like that. So we are dealing with, I'm going to call unfamiliar drivers, at least from the site, as well, especially if you're renting a U-Haul or a similar type truck. And in order to get into the two loading bays, you actually have to take two different ways. So if you want to hit one loading bay, you got to go around the building. If you got to hit the other loading bay, you got to come in the front. So I think that's a little bit, I think it's going to create some confusion for drivers. And one of our recommendations was to kind of re-massage that area so that there is one direction for the trucks. And I think it's doable by just moving a few things around. That's number one. And number two, and I brought this up at the October 3rd October hearing, is the sidewalk from Route 9 into the office. If you look at the plan, it basically, brings you right in near the access, and the crosswalk guides the pedestrians up against the building. Our concern is that you have drive-up units right there as well as the loading bays. So now you're going to a mixture of pedestrians in with the loading area. So if you have trucks coming out or cars coming out of the loading bay, there's no visibility of pedestrian that may be in that crosswalk. So that is a safety concern that our office has had. One of my recommendations was try to relocate that sidewalk, and the applicant's engineer said they couldn't do it. We took a look at some other metro facilities, not all of them, and I don't want to quote, but it seems like the loading bays and most of the other metro storages I've seen have been away from the office, and there's really not a mixture of pedestrians with the loading area. So they are my two main concerns. That's pretty much left.
Is that put there because of the elevator? I'm assuming there's an inside elevator, right?
I can answer that question, that our standard prototype is that the two bays are adjacent to the office. That is what is our standard development plan for the past 3 years. So some of the stores around New Jersey are different types, and they are conversions of existing buildings where we could not actually do that. So our preference is to have the loading bays adjacent to the office, so that the project's property manager can actually witness what's going on in the bay.
Are they all on curves like that? your office in this case, right? Is it not?
So the office is, there's a, as you can see on the,
Why don't you come up and just be up on a microphone so people can hear?
I got one. So,
Mark that A6.
Yeah, let's mark that as Exhibit A6. Chairman, just what we're marking as Exhibit A6, this is color rendered of that revised site plan that was made between October and November.
okay, so the office location is right here, and the bays are right here. So referring to the comment about you'd have to come at them two different ways, we see, and we've used this arrangement in other facilities where the truck would come and pull this way and then back into the loading bays. I don't see that you would have to, although you could if you needed to circumvent or circulate around the building and do it that way, but the longest box truck is about 34, 35 feet long, and we've provided sufficient distance to pull into the space and then back into the bay. But this is a preferred arrangement, having the office adjacent to the loading bays so that the operation of loading and unloading could be monitored by the property manager that's in the office. I do have one more piece, excuse me. Regarding the fact, here we go, that the customers that are on foot that would be walking across here, we do have those loading bay doors, when they go up and they operate, we have both visual and horn strobes that are fairly loud. I won't call them loud, but they're attention-getting for the people in the trucks, so that seeing these are sometimes weekend warriors, and maybe unfamiliar with driving a truck, is that sometimes if they don't wait long enough, the door won't be fully up before they try to pull out. So what we actually implement is we have a gate system on the inside of these bays. So the gate will not go up until the door is fully up, and the visual that they see will, basically get their attention to the fact that the door is going up. And then once the door is up, the gate arm goes up, and then you could pull out. So that would give sufficient notice to anybody that's in this area on foot that, there will eventually be somebody coming out of that bay.
In regards to the loading bay accessibility, the applicant's engineer did provide templates for each loading bay accessibility, and it showed two different paths.
Okay.
And that was our concern, is that, if you want to get into the one bay, you got to take one route, you got to get into the other bay, you got to take another route. And I just thought there was massaging a few things up front, maybe, flip-flopping a parking space and readjusting the loading area, maneuverability area, I think can be accommodated. Regards to the pedestrians, I'll defer that to the board. I'm not, my concern again is somebody who's pulling out of those loading bays is not going to be able to see a pedestrian, but again, I'll defer that to the board. Understand that, if you do, yes, somebody could visually see the doors coming up and hear a horn. May not be the other way. Mm-hmm.
Anything else, Ms. John? You have anything else right now?
I do not.
All right,
As long as the applicant agrees with the remaining.
Yeah.
Yeah.
of my comments.
I'm going to go to Mr. Hart, the fire marshal. I'm going to go to the board members. Then I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Sachs, okay?
Satisfied from the November meeting.
Fire marshal, you have no problems with the presentation as given tonight? I'm going to go to my board members on my left of the witness. Or we can do any of them. If you have any questions, I'll start on my left. Mr. Walker.
Okay. After looking at the site plan, one of the concerns I have is when you exit the proposed project, you're coming into the deceleration lane, which is very close to the ramp going into the Cindy Street exit there. And in the state of New Jersey's infinite wisdom, they now allow buses to transverse on the shoulders. And there's also a bus stop right in that Cindy Lane jug handle. And those buses, as well as some of our people riding on the roads, they may not be decelerating when they come into that lane. I find I think that's going that where you exit is just going to be too close. You're going to go you have to go from a deceleration lane right into the lane of traffic. Hopefully, you're gonna catch the red light where there's now traffic's not gonna be moving. I just think it's gonna create a hazard with people trying to get into that deceleration lane, into the Cindy Road jug handle, and the buses coming down that road.
Anything else, Mr. Walker? Oh, are you going to have a comment?
Yep.
Yep, okay.
John Harder, Atlantic Traffic.
Still under oath, Mr. Harder.
This application is under DOT's jurisdiction. It's a minor access permit, as I explained in my testimony, which is a low generator, the lowest category outside of a single-family residential permit. It is a unique location. We met with DOT up front, which we typically do not do for minor applications because of the jug handle. And ultimately, the DOT asked us to put the driveway as far west as as far south as we can, and granted us a waiver from edge clearance. So typically, you would have 12 feet from the adjacent property. At the south end of the property, we have 0-foot edge clearance, and that was the intent, is to maximize the distance from the signal and the jug handle. As was indicated, DOT's granted and executed a permit. And I also testified that we recognize the site is unusual, but given that the type of use, the low intensity nature, the fact that we have repeat users that will be familiar with the site entering and exiting, it's really the best of uses for this site. So given the constraints, we think this is the best place for the driveway and the best land use.
Walker, anything else?
It's my concern.
Anybody on my left? Further questions?
Yep. So hours of operation, and I don't want to speak out of turn.
I had 9:30 to 6 PM Monday to Friday, and 6 AM to 10 AM access, correct?
Correct. They're slightly shorter on Saturday and Sunday. Shorter than that, limited on Saturday and Sunday.
November, would you?
Correct. So essentially, we have, the facility is available at 6 AM. We do have the facility staffed from approximately 9 to 6. Customers, however, can access in that 6 AM to the time that it is open. They cannot get into their units between the hours of 10 PM and 6 AM on that Monday to Friday time frame, and on the lesser hours on Saturdays and Sundays.
Where does the gate stop them again, once they get off the highway? So let's just hypothetically say a 30-foot box truck pulls in, where does it stop?
Gate here,
Right.
so they'd be relegated to the front of the facility, and the other gate would be back in here.
Well, I'm saying, if you had gate access only, you'd come in, there'd no one to be in the office, so that wouldn't be open, correct?
Correct, you can't
Okay.
get in the office.
How many more can we get in behind that besides that one guy? One more?
I don't understand the question.
Well, if one person pulls in,
Oh, you're talking about the queuing.
yeah, how much could queue behind it? One more, two more?
I'd have to measure what this is, but there's probably enough room for, if you're gonna have a truck, you're bringing the truck up here, but if you're typically with a car,
Yeah.
and you have a unit back in here, you'd pull up to the gate, you'd punch in your PIN, the gate would go up and you'd come in. That takes a matter of maybe 20 seconds. So queuing, though, my guess is, and Brad, maybe you can help me out, but 60 feet, so maybe 4 cars.
Okay.
3 to 4 cars.
We'd be far enough off that we wouldn't have a backup out onto the highway.
I'd love to have that many people showing up at my facility, but that's not.
Don't say that. We don't-
That's
you
not
don't-
gonna be the case. That will not be the case.
No, I'm sure it will not be. Okay, thanks. We got everyone. My plans are to turn this over to Mr. Sachs at this point. I want to tell all the people that are here, and anybody that may be an objector or want to speak on this matter tonight, the public portion will come, so please don't leave. But I think there's another portion that's coming up now. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Sachs.
Yeah, and before I get to that, Mr. Chairman, just two questions. I don't know if we addressed this at one of the earlier meetings. Lighting in the rear, what's the situation with lighting there? Can we have some condition that the lighting will be turned off after a certain hour?
Yes. I forget what we discussed exactly.
So typically what happens with the facility, when the facility shuts down at 10, all the lighting goes off.
Okay.
So unless, we've had requests from townships where police departments may have wanted some to stay on, but typically everything goes off at 10. In this case, there's no lights on the back of the one-story building. The lights that would be on the back of this portion of the building would be low enough where they would not be visible from back here because they're going to be below the height of this building.
Right, but
Would be lighting along the side for the driveways. I don't like pole lighting. We try to do everything off of the building with a shielded, no glare. You can't see the generator of the light. So it'd be, they call it black sky if you want it, but they're shielded, so.
Right, but in any event, the lighting's off by 10 p.m., okay. And my second question, just to follow up to Ms. Drum's comments, would the applicant agree as a condition of approval, if this board acts favorably, to, I guess, revisit the situation with parking, maybe changing some of the location of some of these parking spaces to address Ms. Drum's concerns?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. All right, I don't have any other questions.
Maybe explain to the board and to the audience.
Yeah, let me, just to the members of the public, we do have an objector who's represented by counsel. So, as is our normal procedure, I'm going to let the objector put his case on now. All right, and certainly after the objector's case is completed, then we'll get to the rest of the public. All right, but since objector is represented by counsel, and I think has a witness, an expert witness here this evening, we're going to proceed with his case at this point.
But I would assume I will also have, at this point in time, the opportunity to cross.
Absolutely, Mr. Gazarovski. The floor is yours, so the applicant's witnesses are available, so come forward.
Thank you. Members of the board, I believe when I was here at the last meeting, I identified myself and also indicating I represent Mr. Ahern, who is representative of a group of...
Mr. Gazarovski, speak into the microphone just so we can pick out.
I believe the last time I was here, I introduced myself, also identified...
Move a little away because it's a lot of feedback. Just tiny bit away from you.
Okay now?
A little bit more.
Okay now?
There you go.
That should be good.
Thank you. I believe at the last hearing, I identified myself and presented you with names of individuals whom I represented. I would say at the end of this meeting, there are a number of residents who are here who live, I guess, to what would be the south of the subject property. Rather than have each of them state their reasons for objecting to this, my intention would be to call one person, let him give the reasons, and just simply then ask whether or not any additional residents would identify themselves by raising their hand and whether they agree with the comments of that individual. I think that'll save a lot of time.
That's fine.
Okay. Good evening, Mr. Graviano. I listened to your testimony, and my first question is, would you agree with me that with regard to this proposed use, you are in fact seeking a D1 use variance, correct?
That is correct.
And you also acknowledge, of course, that located immediately to the south of the subject application, there is a significant residential community with numerous residential homes.
I would agree that there are single-family homes abutting the site. The term significant is up for debate because within the development portion of the site, there's approximately 4 homes.
Well, whether significant is 1 home or whether significant is 10 homes, that's really kind of irrelevant because the question would be what impact, if any, this proposed use would have upon the adjacent residential use, correct?
That wasn't really in the form of a question, it was more of a statement.
Well, take it for what it is. Would you agree with me that if, in fact, there were only 1 residential home located adjacent to this property, his property rights would have to be protected and the burden would be upon you to present testimony and evidence as to why this use variance should be granted?
That's correct.
Okay. Now, I take it that when a zone is created, zones are created by ordinance, are they not?
Yes, they are.
And when uses are established within a zone, those uses are also created by ordinance.
That is correct.
And when various safeguards are created with regard to uses, with regard to setbacks, with regard to heights of buildings and whatnot, they are all created by ordinance.
Yes.
Would you agree with me that with regard to that area of development, which is immediately adjacent to the residential use, the governing body of this municipality saw fit to say that the required setback to that adjacent residential zone should be 50 feet?
Yes.
Now, at that particular time, if anyone, including the owner of the property in question, objected to that, they could have challenged it in the form of a prerogative writ suit, could they not?
That's a question for the lawyer.
Okay. Having said that, would you agree with me that for whenever the ordinance in question was passed, that requirement of a 50-foot setback has stood there?
Yes.
Now, and you indicated, of course, that you are seeking relief from that, but in fact, the required setback of 50 feet is almost, not isn't it, but almost twice the setback required compared to what you have shown on your plan.
The applicant is proposing 27.9 feet where 50 is required. However, in my testimony, I discussed topographical
I'll get to that.
as well as
I'll get to
the
that. My
presence
question
of other
was-
design features
my
that help
question
mitigated
was-
the buffer implications.
My question was, is that the required buffer is almost twice the amount that your client is providing.
50 feet is required where 27.9 feet is
Okay,
proposed.
so it's less than twice as much, but it is what it is. Now, I think it's stated in your testimony that there are other factors that the board should consider, such as topographic features and such as that. Was that not your testimony?
Yes, I did indicate that, given the topography of this site, height is mitigated through the grade change on the site. The extensive landscaping package that the applicant has proposed has helped mitigate any detrimental effects of the reduced buffer, as well as the liner building that's present within the buffer area also serves as a buffer in that it will help reduce vehicular glare or noise that is conducted in the drive aisle area.
You have utilized the word help or helped on at least 2 occasions in your testimony just now, and perhaps it was 3, but I could live with 2. So, to me, the word help is less than a definitive statement that it will completely eliminate the reduction in the size of the buffer. So it will not eliminate it, will it?
I believe that in this case, the buffering is adequate for the reduced buffer size.
Well, if you say it's adequate, with regard to the impact that it would have upon my client's property, what is your definition of adequate? Is it similar to help?
I believe that there's no impact with the applicant's
impact
design
whatever.
scheme.
Then why is it then that the governing body said that the buffer should be 50 feet?
That was the standard that was put into ordinance by the governing body.
That's still the standard, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Now, when you speak in terms of buffering in that 27-foot strip, so to say, isn't it completely logical that if you were to fully satisfy the requirements of the zone being 50 feet, it would be twice as effective as what you are proposing?
That's up for debate.
Why is that up for debate? If you have the same amount of plantings in that 50 feet as compared to the 27 feet, wouldn't you be increasing the protection by 100%?
Not necessarily, because you do see scenarios where built structures, whether it be a fence or a structure itself provide buffering to other properties. So strict landscaping per se, you know, if you had a 50-foot of open land, even though it's 50 feet, it might not necessarily provide the buffering that you would want. It would have the size requirement, but it wouldn't have the buffering characteristics that you would like to see.
Wouldn't this board, in its review, since you are seeking a use variance, and if you were in fact to have that 50 feet of buffering, they could be very demanding with regard to the amount of buffering that they would want in that 50 feet, could they not?
Yes, they could.
So, really and truly, and I'm not saying this disparagingly, this is a little bit of smoke and mirrors, isn't it? 50 feet is required, you're providing 27 feet. The board could call for 50 feet of buffering just as intense, if not more so, than you're proposing in the 27 feet, which would mean there'd be the required protection to my client from this use, which is not a permitted use in the zone.
I didn't hear a question in the statement.
Well, my question is, if the board were to require there be 50 feet of buffering, would that not give greater protection to my client from this use which is not a permitted use? Is that a sufficient, clear enough question for you?
I just answered that question before. It doesn't need answering again.
Okay. In listening to your testimony, I'd like to clarify one thing. This is being advertised as a self-storage facility, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Now, and I think self-storage means different things to different people. Is the proposed self-storage facility on this particular site being limited to self-storage for residential homes, such as XX furniture, lamps, rugs, things of that nature, or will it be utilized in a commercial setting?
The operational characteristics of the building are better answered by the operator who is here this evening.
No, but you've given testimony with regard to it. Are you now telling us that you have no idea how this building is going to operate?
No, I'm not saying that. I know how self-storage buildings operate. However, more detailed questions regarding the operational characteristics are appropriate to the operator who is here before the board this evening.
Okay, I didn't hear him give testimony with regard to it, and if he didn't do it, I don't see how you could opine as an expert planner with regard to this. So let's just see how much you actually know how this building is going to operate, okay? Do you have any knowledge whatever?
Yes, I do.
What knowledge do you have?
The applicant provides various storage spaces of different sizes. There are regulations regarding what can be stored in units. There are hours of operation, so whether it's a residential or commercial users, as long as they stay within the guidelines of what can and cannot be stored within the units, you know, the storage capabilities are appropriate, whether it's a residential or a commercial user.
Okay. Now, when you say regulations, has the applicant or the board, has the applicant and/or you provided to the board what those regulations will be or they are for a use such as this?
Yes, and detailed testimony about the operator on day one.
The applicant has provided that testimony at the first hearing in relation to the project.
Okay. Were you present at that first meeting?
No, I was not, but I read the
Well,
transcripts.
if you read the transcript, can you then tell us what the applicant said?
Yes, I'm very familiar with the applicant's operation. There are limitations in terms of what you can store in terms of flammable materials. There are prohibited items which you cannot store. You cannot operate, or conduct construction activity in the units. So the applicant does have a strict set of guidelines that gives to the prospective renters when they sign up for a lease agreement.
If in fact those regulations presently exist, will your client agree to have them marked into evidence and stipulate that this particular unit cannot be utilized in any fashion other than what's in those regulations?
I'm not authorized to make that representation on behalf of my client.
I
The
understand
client's
that.
counsel is here as well as the client itself.
Perhaps we could address that later on. Now, would you agree with me, and I don't know the answer to this, that's why I'm asking it of you, can you really equate self-storage with a warehouse use?
Yes, whether it's someone storing something or a business or operator storing something, it is a storage use, just in individual smaller scales.
Okay, so let's say, for example, a retail user in town sells televisions or refrigerators or whatever else it may be. He could utilize this as a warehouse-type use for the storage of his inventory.
Yes, as long as that inventory does not conflict with the prohibited items that have been established by the operator.
Now, I also, and perhaps I heard you wrong, but I thought I heard you say that as we progress in the digital age, in the computer age or whatnot, people oftentimes shop at home or do things such as buying and selling or whatnot through a computer. Is it the intention of the operator, for example, in this matter, to, let's say, look online what a retail user is selling, as TV sets, widgets, whatever it may be, place an order with the retail user or use, and then that person's employee would go to the site, remove the inventory from the site, and deliver it to a customer?
I don't understand the question.
My question
I'm
is,
going to object. It's an operations question. It's perhaps a question that's appropriate as to these types of specifics. Mr. Graviano is our professional planner, speaking to the nature of the variance relief, et cetera, and I don't think it's an appropriate line of questioning.
I'm going to allow Mr. Sachs to be the arbiter here because you guys are far more schooled than me in legal matters. Mr. Sachs?
Cross-examination.
yeah, and I think if he's unable to answer the
Can't
question,
answer, all right, it's cross-examination. If he can't answer it, he can say he
that
can't
would
answer
certainly
it.
go to
but-
his credibility.
No, I'm not saying I can't answer it. I'm just saying that the question was not structured in a fashion where I could produce an answer.
Well, why don't you
Well,
interpret?
unless Mr. Gazarovski rephrases the question, maybe then you'll understand it.
Let me try to lay a foundation. You said you're familiar with this type of use for Metro Storage.
Yes.
Are there other Metro Storage facilities located, to your knowledge, in New Jersey?
Yes, the applicant does have other operations in New
Have
Jersey.
you had occasion to testify at any hearings relative to when those uses were being applied for?
Yes.
Okay. So have you visited these sites?
Yes, I have visited sites, yes.
Okay. Now, my question would be, if in fact a local retail utilizer is storing his inventory at that site, whether it's books or refrigerators or whatever else it would be, and perhaps he's even operating online, if an order is placed to that retail seller,
Yes.
can an employee of his go to the site, remove a refrigerator or a TV from the site, and deliver it to the purchaser without it having been in the store?
The applicant will not allow shipments to this site.
What do you mean by that?
So the item would have to be shipped to the retailer who would deliver it to the storage location. The facility itself will not receive shipments.
So what are you saying is that everything that the applicant is selling in his store is first shipped to his store and then delivered to the site?
Or wherever they get the goods shipped to, but they're not getting the material shipped to the site.
I just want to clarify this. You're identifying the site as the self-storage facility, correct?
Correct.
Okay. My question then is, if in fact the retail owner is ordering a dozen refrigerators, okay? Can that shipment of refrigerators be delivered directly to this self-storage facility?
I just said no.
Okay. It's first delivered to the store,
It's first delivered to a location, yes.
a location other than this,
Yes.
and then from that location, it is then delivered to this location.
Potentially, yes.
Okay, so potentially, that means that shipments can be delivered to the site.
No, direct shipments. If a retailer receives a shipment to a store or some other location, and that retailer itself brings it to their storage units, that's the nature of the storage business. Someone brings materials to their storage facility.
Okay, now, if someone buys that particular material, would the refrigerator first go back to the retail store and then out to the customer, or would it go directly from the storage facility to the purchaser?
That's, that's to be seen. People use facilities in different manners.
Okay. Assuming that to be so, would that not greatly increase the amount of traffic coming onto and leaving this site?
You heard Mr. Harder in a previous meeting testify to the trip generation for the self-storage facility. This is pretty trued out data, and he has made testimony and has produced data that shows the trip generations for the proposed self-storage building.
He has produced data pursuant to, I believe, the ITE for a self-storage facility, not for a facility such as this, is basically warehousing inventory goods and then delivering them to customers.
I don't agree with that
Okay.
statement.
Now, and I understand that you're testifying as an expert witness in the field of planning, and I also understand that you have received all necessary licensing and certifications with regard to profession, correct?
Yes, I'm a licensed planner in the state of New Jersey.
Okay, now, in order to approach and give testimony with regard to this application, did you have occasion to review all of the existing Township of Old Bridge's land use ordinances?
Yes, I reviewed the OG ordinance requirements as well as the Old Bridge Master Plan.
What else did you review?
I looked at the other ordinances that are identified in the review letters with respect to the variances and waivers that were identified both in the applicant's application as well as the professional's review letters.
Okay, now, with regard to professionals' review letters, did you in fact review, whether it be the engineer's or the planner's review letter?
Yes, I reviewed the planner and engineer's review letter.
Now, in that review letter, did they have a somewhat substantial list of nonconformities which have to be satisfied by your testimony? Correct?
There was a list, whether it's substantial or not, that's up for debate.
That's okay. Everything's up for debate, but let's assume that it's a list, correct?
Yes, there is a
Can you
list.
tell me how many of those items in that list your client voluntarily corrected it without coming before this board for either a waiver or a variance?
That question doesn't make sense.
Doesn't make sense? Okay. You're aware of the fact of the letter that was, let me just take a look at it if I may. Now, there's a Township of Old Bridge, the Department of Community Development. There's a review letter which was sent to Mr. Sullivan. It was from Vena Sarwant, who was the planner, and it's a multi-page document, and when I look at it, I see a number of variances which he points out, a number of nonconformities which he points out, amongst them, of course, being maximum building height, maximum floor area, buffering, parking, and or like, and then on page 4, there is even a more extensive list of bulk variances. were any of those pointed out variances and/or waivers by her, have any of them been addressed and corrected by the applicant without his having to come before this board for relief?
The question still does not make sense.
Okay, does it make sense to you?
I think I understand the question. I think the question is, have you sought to abate any of the variances that have been sought in connection with this application? Is that the question, Mr. Gazarovski? Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm paying attention.
Yeah,
Write that word abate down so we can
Okay.
have it next meeting. Which have been abated? Wait, I object to the witness seeking assistance from his attorney. He's the professional giving testimony. That's part of what he should know.
Understood. Answer the question, Mr. Gazarovski.
Yes, the applicant has agreed to remove the LED sign as well as
That was tonight, wasn't it?
reduce the freestanding sign area and has agreed to add additional parking to the parking area.
Those are
We
the,
had previously, before this hearing,
Counselor.
eliminated one building sign as discussed earlier.
All right, Counselor, let Mr.
well,
Graviano
Mr.
testify.
Scala and have him testify so we can.
He doesn't, no, he's not going to testify, but Mr. Graviano can.
I'm just joking. I understand. So when we're talking in terms of abatement, those three abatements occurred this evening.
Correct.
Now, in accordance with the existing land use ordinance, can you tell me in the OG zone, how many uses are in fact permitted and how many uses are conditional?
I went through the OG zone permitted uses in my testimony. I do not recall the conditional uses. However, there is an extensive list of OG zone permitted uses.
What do you think is extensive means?
That there are in excess of 10 permitted uses in the zone.
My planner tells me there's 107 permitted uses in that zone.
Okay.
Does that match with what you think there's there? Is there a difference between 10 and 107?
Of course.
Well, if there's 107, that really provides to the applicant a wide variety of potential uses for this property.
However, the
not my question.
the applicant's request is a response to the master plan, which recognizes that the permitted land uses in this zone have not created an environment or a land use scheme to promote the commercial development that the township desires along the Route 9 corridor, and this proposal is a response to the zone plan, which, essentially justifies this use being reconciled in the zone.
Well, is there anything in the master plan and/or the reexamination of the master plan that specifically says that storage facilities, mini storage facilities, shall be a permitted use in this zone?
No, there is not.
Is there anything in any document by way of a writing or recommendation or anything from the governing body saying, we would like to see mini storage facilities in this zone?
The intent and purpose of the OG zone coincides with the applicant's proposal this evening.
It's not my question. My question was, you said that, and I believe it, I know that I am paraphrasing you, that the intent of the governing body was to allow a use, possibly allow a use such as this, and I acknowledge that perhaps I'm misquoting you. So my question is there any document that you're aware of in the municipal records, minutes, whatever else it may be, that would say to this board, the governing body, which is a legislative body of this community, would like to see a metro storage facility on this property?
Yes, it does coincide with the purposes of the OG zone to provide business establishments to serve residents of the entire community and
Well,
population.
you could put up a hot dog stand, and that'll serve the residents. But tell me where it says that this specific use, which requires a use variance with various other variances, including a height variance to the setback, this is something this town would like to see.
It coincides with the purpose of the OG zone and the zoning
Is
ordinance.
there anything in the OG zone that says, oh, by the way, one of our purposes, which we didn't include in here, is to have storage facilities?
No, there is not.
Thank you. Now, I think I indicated to you, and my planner will have to back me up on this, that there's 107 permitted uses, and he also tells me there's 16 conditional uses. Now, is it possible that in those 125 uses, which are either permitted or conditional, that some of them would have a less impact on traffic and parking than would your proposed plan? That would be able to satisfy the floor area ratio, be able to satisfy the height variance, and be able to satisfy all of the setback requirements.
That question began with respect to a traffic scenario. The traffic testimony has been providing, and the traffic testimony did indicate that it is less intense than many of the permitted
Oh, I'm
land
not
uses in the
asking you that.
district.
You know that. I'm asking you whether or not some of those permitted uses or conditional uses have less of a traffic impact upon the site and the surrounding area than this use you're seeking a use variance for.
I do not know. I'm not a traffic engineer. I don't have traffic data.
Well, wouldn't that also be a part within your purview as a planner to take that into consideration?
Yes, I did take that in consideration, and, it's definitely less intensive than hotels and motels, drinking establishments,
we know
banks and
that.
financial institutions, hospitals and medical services, doctors' offices, law offices, research studios, schools, playgrounds, community centers. I think, as I've heard in many applications with respect to self-storage facilities.
I don't want to hear about other applications. Let's talk about this application.
I am talking about this application, and I'm talking about a land use and referring to the use itself in the industry where, I think if you ask the traffic engineer, they'll tell you this is one of the lower intensity land uses from a traffic standpoint. But, myself do not have that data
But
because
it's
I'm
not a
not a
permitted
traffic
use, so
engineer.
he couldn't testify as to that, could he? Now, are you aware of the fact that in the town or township of Old Bridge, there are in fact other zones such as the CC zone or the SD zone where a mini storage facility is a conditionally permitted use?
Yes,
Okay, now, your client is a contract purchaser, is he not?
that's a question for
You know the
client's
answer. You
counsel.
don't know the answer, you don't have to. But I don't think you
It's
identified.
it's not a land use matter.
Pardon me?
I don't think it's really relevant, Mr.
That's
Gazarovski.
okay. Now, do you know whether or not your client, prior to coming before this board for a use variance, made any attempt to locate a land property in Old Bridge where it is a conditionally permitted use?
That's irrelevant to my analysis. I provided testimony on the suitability for the proposed use to this site and provided testimony for the characteristics to this site, identified why this proposed use is suitable for the
Well,
site.
would you agree with me that if in fact there are areas in Old Bridge where there are zones where the use is either permitted or a conditionally permitted use, that the governing body has made a determination that that property, not this property, is more particularly suited for this type of use?
This board exists for applicants to demonstrate specific reasons and site-specific characteristics to why uses that are not permitted in the district should be approved by the board.
I think they know the parameters they have, but having said that, did you look at the zoning requirements or standards or either in the CC zone or the SD zone?
No, I did not.
So you're not aware of the fact that in those particular zones where the use is permitted, your client would still need variances for setback, height, and the like.
It's not relevant. The applicant has requested the variances in relation to the use variance requested for this particular site.
Now, and I didn't catch this, and you may or may not know the answer, but do you know how many storage cubicles there will be in these two facilities?
I do not recall off the top of my head.
I'm sorry?
I do not recall the number of
Okay.
units in the
Do you
facility.
know what the approximate size of the cubicles in question are?
There are various ranges from 8 by 10 feet to the ground level units, which are more of a garage type unit. So there are varying size for the varying needs of the self-storage user.
And I didn't catch this either in your testimony or the like, but as I understand, the building which is closest to Route 9, that is a three-story facility, is it not?
That is a 3-story building.
Okay, and on the three-story building, and I take it that the doors open toward Route 9, is that correct?
Yes.
On either of these sites, do any of them have doors which open in the rear of the building? In other words, on the three-story one in the front, do they also have doors that open in the rear of that facility?
Of this particular building?
Yeah.
No, there are not doors that open in the rear of the building.
How about with regard to the smaller building?
The smaller building, there are doors that are accessed from the front of the building.